There's a point in every Hollywood legal battle where the story stops being about what happened and starts being about who you believe. And right now, in the increasingly tangled disputes surrounding It Ends With Us, we are firmly in that territory. A failed settlement meeting, multiple parallel lawsuits, unsealed depositions, media spin from every direction, and at the center of it all, two completely different versions of reality. Earlier this week, both sides attempted to resolve matters privately. No agreement was reached. That alone says a lot. When legal teams walk into a room with the intention of compromise and walk out without one, it usually means neither side feels vulnerable enough to fold. It also signals confidence, or at least strategy. The legal drama doesn't stop there. In addition to the core dispute between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, there are connected cases involving Baldoni's publicist and others tied to the production. The result? A web of filings that makes this one of the most layered celebrity disputes in recent memory. Even seasoned entertainment reporters are struggling to keep up. And then there's the media narrative. One report highlighted Lively's courtroom appearance, not for legal strategy, but for optics. Designer accessories were itemized, the cost of her bag and boots mentioned. Another story suggested she appeared disengaged during proceedings, and even had her driver deliver a mahjong set to the courthouse. Whether that detail is exaggerated or not, it became symbolic. The framing shifted from actress in legal battle to celebrity behaving entitled. That shift matters, because public perception in cases like this doesn't form in a vacuum, it's shaped by repetition. Meanwhile, Baldoni's team has submitted what they claim is evidence of coordinated narrative manipulation. One notable example is a TikTok video in which a content creator cryptically warns that women connected to the film are victims and that major revelations are coming. The implication was clear. Something explosive was about to surface about Baldoni and producer Jamie Heath. But here's where it becomes murky. The public has heard references to 9 women allegedly uncomfortable on set, yet depositions and filings so far appeared to confirm that only 2 individuals directly claimed discomfort regarding specific incidents. Others named in online narratives were not formally accusing Baldoni or Heath of misconduct tied to this production. The gap between what is rumored and what is formally alleged is widening, and that gap raises a critical question: who is feeding information into the ecosystem? In modern Hollywood disputes, the courtroom is only one battlefield. The other is digital, social media, online publications, influencer commentary. We've seen text messages in this case between publicists and journalists discussing framing and timing of stories. That alone doesn't prove wrongdoing. PR teams exist to shape narratives. But when similar messaging appears in influencer circles, it invites scrutiny. Some creators have publicly stated they were warned that damaging information about Baldoni was about to drop and were encouraged to reconsider criticism of Lively. That doesn't automatically establish orchestration, but it suggests a climate of strategic narrative positioning. At the same time, Baldoni and Heath deny coordinated smear tactics and maintain their actions were professional and mischaracterized. The truth may ultimately depend less on emotion and more on documentation. Which brings us to the most contested incident so far, the trailer confrontation. This alleged moment, involving Jamie Heath entering Lively's hair and makeup trailer while she was partially undressed, has become a focal point. It's being used as supporting evidence in claims of workplace misconduct, but the depositions reveal something fascinating. 4 people present, 4 significantly different recollections. In workplace misconduct cases, consistency is often powerful. When multiple witnesses independently describe the same sequence of events in the same way, credibility strengthens. When memories diverge, especially on basic facts like whether someone was standing or sitting, juries take notice. And this incident is filled with divergence. Was Lively standing or seated? Was she breastfeeding, pumping, getting body makeup applied? Did Heath knock? Did he hear "don't come in" or "come in"? Was the door open a crack or fully opened? Did he face away or look into a mirror reflection? These are not minor details. They shape whether the interaction reads as intrusive or misinterpreted. Another nuance. In the depositions available so far, witnesses describe the moment as awkward and uncomfortable. They do not uniformly label it harassment. That distinction may matter legally. The language people choose under oath carries weight. There's also the timeline element. According to Heath's testimony, no complaint about this incident was raised until Lively filed her formal complaint months later. Lively's side may argue that delayed reporting is common in workplace disputes. Baldoni's side will likely argue that silence at the time suggests misunderstanding rather than misconduct. Both arguments are familiar in modern entertainment litigation. And beneath all of this is the larger context. It Ends With Us is not a small indie project. It's an adaptation of the best-selling novel by Colleen Hoover, a book centered around themes of abuse and power dynamics. That context intensifies scrutiny. Allegations tied to a film about abuse carries symbolic weight for fans and media alike. When narratives about all the women being victims circulate online, it amplifies that symbolism. But when depositions narrow the scope of formal complaints, it complicates it. At this stage, what we have isn't clarity, it's contradiction. We have a failed settlement, competing depositions, allegations of narrative manipulation, media optics battles, and a story that appears far from over. The question now isn't just what happened inside that trailer, it's whether the legal record, stripped from PR framing and online speculation, will eventually present a version of events strong enough to withstand cross-examination. Because in cases like this, perception moves fast, evidence moves slower. To understand how this situation escalated, you have to look closely at the depositions themselves, not just the conclusions people draw from them, but the raw inconsistencies that jump off the page. Let's start with the producer, Alex Sachs. When questioned about the trailer incident, her answers were marked by one recurring phrase, "I don't recall." She did not recall whether Lively said Heath barged in. She did not recall whether Lively specifically said she was undressed. She did not recall whether anyone yelled for him not to enter. Yet, when pressed about how the situation made Lively feel, Sachs stated she perceived Lively was uncomfortable. That distinction is subtle but important. Perception isn't the same as recollection. In a courtroom, perception can be influenced by what someone hears later, through conversations, legal complaints, or media coverage. A jury will likely be asked to consider whether Sachs's understanding came from witnessing the event directly or absorbing it afterward. Then comes Vivian Baker, Lively's longtime makeup artist. Her testimony is more vivid. She recalls yelling, "No, no, don't come in." She remembers Lively being topless, breastfeeding on one side and covering the other with a towel. She says Heath entered anyway and remained in the doorway during a brief conversation. She claims he could have seen Lively through the mirror. But even within her account, there are ambiguities. She describes Heath standing at the door with it slightly open, meaning others outside could potentially hear. She says she focused on finishing her job rather than intervening further. She characterizes the interaction as a violation in feeling, but again, not explicitly harassment. And then there's the hairstylist, Anne. Her version shifts the physical dynamics again. In her testimony, Lively was standing, not seated. There was no knock, just the door opening. She isn't sure whether Lively was fully nude or wearing a nude thong. She recalls saying, "Whoa, whoa, whoa," but does not specifically remember saying, "Don't come in." She describes the situation as uncomfortable and strange. Standing versus seated, knock versus no knock, fully nude versus partially clothed. These aren't tiny differences, they're structural ones. Now compare that with Jamie Heath's account. He says he knocked. He says he heard what he interpreted as permission to enter. He claims that upon noticing Lively in what appeared to be a nursing position, he offered to leave. According to him, Lively responded, "You can come in, just look away." He states he did not look at her directly and that the conversation lasted only a few minutes. He also says she never raised any objection immediately afterward and later joined the group for a separate meeting without mentioning the incident. This is not a minor discrepancy. It's a complete inversion of narrative. In one version, 3 women loudly attempt to block entry, and Heath ignores them. In the other, he knocks, receives permission, and is invited in with instructions to avert his gaze. In workplace investigations, timing matters as much as testimony. One question attorneys often ask is, was the behavior addressed contemporaneously? According to Heath, no complaint was raised that day. According to the others, there was shock but no extended discussion. That silence becomes part of the evidentiary puzzle. There's also context surrounding professional dynamics on set. Text messages that surfaced in filings show frustration between certain production members, not necessarily about harassment, but about scheduling, creative control, and interpersonal tension. These details may not excuse inappropriate behavior if it occurred, but they do complicate the emotional landscape. Another layer worth examining is the public narrative around 9 women. Online discourse framed the situation as a widespread pattern, yet depositions and filings appeared to confirm that most of the named individuals did not file independent harassment complaints regarding Heath or Baldoni tied to this production. The expansion of numbers in public conversation versus the narrower scope in legal documentation is striking, and in high-profile cases, numbers carry power. 9 women sounds systemic. 2 women reporting discomfort sounds more isolated. Both interpretations create dramatically different impressions. And it's also impossible to ignore the role of social media acceleration. The TikTok video attached as evidence by Baldoni's team adds another dimension. A content creator, speaking vaguely about investigations and victims, urged others to prepare for damaging revelations. Whether that video stemmed from credible sources or speculative messaging is unclear, but its existence demonstrates how quickly reputational narratives can form before legal findings do. Hollywood has seen this pattern before. In disputes involving power imbalances, public reaction often precedes fact-finding. In other cases, accusations have been validated. In some, they have unraveled under scrutiny. The challenge for observers and eventually for jurors is separating emotional momentum from documented evidence. There's also the broader reputational dimension. Lively, long positioned as a poised, brand-savvy actress with a carefully curated public image, now faces headlines scrutinizing not just allegations, but demeanor, wardrobe choices, even accessories in court. Baldoni, known publicly for advocacy around healthy masculinity and emotional vulnerability, now faces accusations that cut directly against that persona. When public identities clash with legal claims, the fallout becomes cultural, not just contractual. What makes this case particularly volatile is that it sits at the intersection of 3 forces: celebrity, social media amplification, and legal ambiguity. Each deposition adds clarity in one sentence and confusion in the next. And the deeper you go into the transcripts, the more you realize this isn't just about what happened in a trailer. It's about credibility. Whose memory feels consistent, whose language sounds rehearsed, whose timeline aligns with documented texts. Those are the quiet calculations happening behind the scenes, by attorneys preparing cross-examinations, and by the public forming opinions. Right now, there is no verdict, no judicial ruling determining fault, only competing sworn statements and a settlement that didn't materialize. But what's becoming increasingly clear is that this legal fight might ultimately hinge less on dramatic accusations and more on granular detail: positioning in a room, tone of voice, seconds of hesitation, wording under oath. And in a courtroom, those granular details can outweigh viral narratives. The question is whether they will. As this case inches closer to what many believe will be a full trial, the real battleground is no longer just the alleged trailer incident. It's the pattern each side is trying to establish. Because in court, isolated moments rarely stand alone. Attorneys build arcs. Blake Lively's legal strategy appears to frame the environment on set as one where boundaries were blurred and professionalism compromised. The trailer incident becomes symbolic, not necessarily because of its severity alone, but because it represents a claimed lack of respect for personal space and workplace protocol. If a jury believes that Heath ignored verbal warnings and remained in a doorway while she was partially undressed, it strengthens a broader narrative of disregard. On the other side, Justin Baldoni and Jamie Heath seem to be constructing a counter-arc built around misinterpretation and retrospective reframing. Their argument isn't just that the moment was innocent, it's that it was handled normally in real time, without protest, and only later recast as misconduct in a formal complaint. That timing is central. Heath testified that Lively did not raise concerns about the trailer incident during the subsequent meeting that same day, nor, according to his account, was it escalated through production channels immediately afterward. From a defense standpoint, that gap can be positioned as evidence that the interaction was awkward at worst, not egregious. But workplace harassment law does not require instant confrontation. Delayed reporting is common, especially in industries with hierarchical power structures. Attorneys representing Lively could argue that silence in the moment does not equal consent or comfort, particularly on a set where creative authority and financial stakes are high. And that's where the context of It Ends With Us becomes more than just backdrop. The film adapts a novel by Colleen Hoover centered on domestic abuse and power imbalance. The irony of a production based on those themes becoming embroiled in its own dispute over boundaries will not be lost on jurors. Symbolism, while not evidence, influences perception. Then there's the reputational chess match unfolding outside the courthouse. Reports dissecting Lively's courtroom attire and accessories may seem trivial, but in high-profile cases, optics subtly shape bias. Portrayals of entitlement can erode sympathy. At the same time, Justin Baldoni's public image, cultivated through interviews about empathy and redefining masculinity, now collides with allegations that challenge that branding. When public personas contradict legal accusations, juries often experience cognitive friction. They ask themselves, is this who this person really is? That internal question can be powerful. Meanwhile, the issue of narrative amplification continues to simmer. The TikTok video introduced by Baldoni's team raises broader concerns about information pipelines. In an era where social media commentary precedes formal filings, distinguishing organic outrage from strategic messaging becomes increasingly difficult. If one side can demonstrate coordinated narrative shaping, especially before formal complaints were filed, it may shift how jurors interpret motive. Conversely, if the video is deemed speculative and unconnected to official parties, it may hold little weight. Another factor that could become pivotal is consistency under cross-examination. Depositions are one thing, live testimony is another. When witnesses must repeat their accounts without transcripts in front of them, small inconsistencies can grow more visible. The differences between seated versus standing, knock versus no knock, towel versus no towel, those details will likely be revisited repeatedly. Credibility often turns not on the dramatic claim, but on whether the surrounding details remain stable. There's also the financial dimension. Production schedules, turnaround times, and budget pressures were referenced in testimony. Heath described negotiating over when to hold a meeting due to cost implications. If the defense can frame the trailer interaction as a rushed, logistical discussion misread in an awkward moment, that narrative competes directly with the idea of deliberate intrusion. What makes this case uniquely modern is that it's unfolding in two arenas simultaneously: a courtroom governed by evidence rules and a digital landscape governed by algorithms. One rewards documentation, the other rewards emotion. And sometimes those forces collide. If this proceeds to trial, jurors won't be asked to decide whether the internet felt uncomfortable. They'll be asked whether specific legal standards were violated. Did someone knowingly ignore clear verbal refusals? Was there intent? Was there reasonable belief of consent to enter? Did the behavior rise to the level of actionable misconduct? Those are precise questions. But human perception is rarely precise. At this stage, no judge has ruled on liability, no jury has weighed in. The failed settlement suggests both sides believe their case can withstand scrutiny, and that means the next phase will likely shift from transcript analysis to live confrontation, attorneys parsing every word, every pause, every contradiction. Until then, what remains is a record of competing memories, contested motives, and a story still in flux. And in Hollywood, where image is currency, the final outcome won't just determine legal responsibility, it will redefine reputations.